Sahana vavatu, sahanao bhunaktu, sahaviryang karavavahai, tejasvina vadhitamastu, ma vidvishawahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So this opening is popular, and I slowed it down so that we can actually think about every statement. May we both be protected. May we both be nourished. May we both put our best efforts to pay attention. May our teaching and our learning shine. May we see different perspectives, and may we be vocal about our perspectives and reconciling them with other perspectives. Ma vidvishavahai. In other words, may we not quarrel by seeing one perspective only at the expense of all of the other perspectives. So it's important to, I know it's in Sanskrit, but I've given you the first sheet, which has little symbolic pictures. So you can look at that sheet on the website, and you can reflect upon when we chant this. Okay, so let's do a revision. Verse 2, last week we have said that Duryodhana has approached Drona and not Bhishma. So Bhishma is the leader of the Kauravas army, and Duryodhana has chosen to approach Drona instead, because he knows that Drona has his son on the side of, on the Kauravas, but at the same time, Drona has love for Arjuna on the other side. So to make this more relatable, you have, you're on one side, and there's a great warrior, there's a great friend that you have next to you, and you know that your great friend can in any moment change their mind and go to the other side. But you need your great friend because they're talented and they're skilled in the art of negotiating in life. And so Duryodhana's approach was to capitalize on Drona's love for his son. So his son was on Kaurava's side. And he says, I just want to remind you that, your son is here, and, you need to protect your son. And I just want to let you know that there are warriors on our side. They're great warriors. They are talented. They're skilled. But equally so, it is the case on the other side. So there's no real reason to make that shift. So this was the first pointer of those verses 2. The second pointer is that if you look at the symbolic meaning of this, it is the power of self-affirmation. So it is an approach that coaches use, or even you can use this between your friends and your close ones, is that you just reassure them with your words that they are in a safe place, and they are, well protected. They are making the right decision, and you provide, you provide the options. Here's your options if you choose that side. Here's options if you go to that side. In Duryodhana's case, because he was self-centered, he was only presenting options and choices to stay on our side. But as an objective human being, you would rather say, look, I am giving you the chance to do whatever is healthy for you. This is a sophisticated mind, how it thinks. I want you to, have capacity of free choice and whatever is healthy for you. So I just want to present to you option 1, and here's all the pros and cons if you choose option 1, and here's the pros and cons if you choose option 2. This is an objective mind speaking, and then you help the other individual assess what is it that I would like to do. And by doing so, they end up liking you because they know that your interest is their well-being, and therefore they will feel a sense of reciprocity to return that back to you. So it's not like, well, why, what's in it for me? Why should I? Because the way that the laws are set up is that when you do something helpful for another individual, that they feel compelled to give that back to you. Maybe not immediately, but maybe sometime in the future, which is going to help you a lot, and you will appreciate it. And you may not remember what you have done before, but you will build a very close, a beautiful relationship, and that's going to help you with your emotional well-being and therefore your state of clarity. So this means that there's a sense of, hey, my friend, my partner, my spouse, I just want to present myself as someone that informs you what your options are, rather than coerces you towards option one for my sake or option two for my sake. Therefore, we are in this sense being objective. So verse 3, then again, it's the same principle. Duryodhana reminds Drona, who's the strong opposition on that side, which was mainly Arjuna, Bhima, and he again reassures Drona, provides him the safe space that you're okay on our side, you're okay, and you have the right to be yourself on our side. And this is very healthy to hear when someone is just there for you and they present you a platform, whether it is in a professional basis, right? Your employer goes up to you and says, you don't have to worry about being liquidated or about being, so you don't have to worry about being, laid off, because we need you and you can feel safe in our presence. And just to hear that, it makes a huge difference. You go home without any stress, you kiss your wife, you can hug your children, you're not carrying that burden of some unknown uncertainties that could happen at work. So in that same manner, we could look at these verses in the sense that Duryodhana is setting that platform for Drona, which is a good quality. It's not like Duryodhana is all bad. There are good qualities that we all have. And so Drona is now feeling reassured. He's saying, okay, so I have my son on my side and I can be myself, and therefore it's going to draw out the best out of Drona. And we all want this for each other. Is this true? Just look at your life. Would it be awesome to have that kind of platform where people just support you and you feel totally secure, totally yourself? You can be goofy, you can be, sometimes you can fall, sometimes you can be confident, and they're just there for you and saying, I'm just going to inform you how you're doing. I'm just going to be your mirror. And through their mirror, you can see where there are feedbacks, where you can change, where you can make some adjustments, and therefore you two together, you grow slowly, slowly. So it's like this. And then verse 46, he was at Duryodhana enumerating who these difficult to defeat warriors are. And one of them was Abhimanyu. And Abhimanyu is a son of Arjuna, and he's young. He's young and he's talented. And this reminds us that young does not necessarily mean inexperienced. Young doesn't necessarily mean you're not worthy of listening. Young usually is not heard nowadays because they don't have the confidence to shine, because no one's providing them that platform. But if you are to provide them that platform, then the young one can actually guide you because they're still open-minded. And that's the one advantage that a young person has over someone who's in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, which is not necessarily, because in 40s and 50s and 60s, you can be even more open-minded than you were as a child. Some of us can relate with this. You're even more open-minded now than you were as a teenager. So this is also the case. So a young person can show you several things. They can show you what it means to be flexible, not only physically, but mentally, what it means to laugh, what it means to joke, what it means to have humor, what it means to sit down and make a messy painting and not be ashamed of, right, what they created, to sit down and express your creativity and not really, be bothered about people criticizing. They can teach you, to just to be innocent and have that beginner's approach. And these are all tremendously wise qualities that make up a wise sage, a wise person. And this is just incidentally what a young person has. So we have so much to learn from them. As long as we look at young people as and we put them inside a box, inexperienced, more to learn, hasn't gone through the struggles, that's factually, it may be true. But at the same time, what is a fact doesn't mean I have the right to put them in a box and then close that box down and then wait for them to sort of grow up and learn their lessons. So this means we all have something to learn from each other. Okay. Now, this brings us to further verses, which we will continue. Unless you have something to say, and then we'll go to verse 7, 8, and 9.
Andre, just some of the practice that I've been doing regarding using a crisis, I found that it's not just the big crisis that it's important to practice in. It's actually the sort of, I call it micro crisis, you know, like you run out of phone battery or you get a red light and you're in a hurry, that sort of thing, because I think twofold is, one, it's very easy to just resort, it's just a small crisis. I can resort to my old habits of getting angry or anxious or whatever, which then in turn makes that a habit for when the big crisis comes. Also, I forgot what I was going to say.
Even if you forgot, I'm loving what you're saying so far, because those small crises, how you respond to the small one and to the big one, remove the adjective small, big, it's still a crisis. So,
yes,
right, you carry over that response to the big one. And that's actually the least thing that we need, because a crisis demands an intelligent response. And if I'm emotionally overreacting or, you know, kind of impulsively coming out with that which stops me from thinking, then that coincidentally makes the crisis even bigger. So that is absolutely right. It's a great chance to practice these holding your, you know, your decision making and your perspectives in small crises, because they're much easier to deal with. Thereby, you just beautifully carry that over in a big crisis. It's excellent point what you're saying. So yes, summary, small crises are an opportunity to develop proper intelligent responses for when those big crises come.
Also, just another thing that I practiced was the self-evaluation. And I think it's so important to do that out loud with your voice. So maybe put some headphones on so you don't look like a crazy person sitting on a park bench. But because otherwise I find that, you know, you say, oh, how's my life going? And then you start answering, and then you go, oh, I wonder where that bird's going, or what does that cloud look like? You can easily get distracted if it's a internal monologue.
Excellent. So this is point number 2. He's saying that our mind the nature of it is to work by association. So you think of pasta, and immediately pasta is associated to Italy, and then Italy is associated to your trip to Europe, and then your trip to Europe is associated to the pickpocketers, and the pickpocketers is associated to, and then you just keep on going like that. So because the mind works through association, there is the tendency for one thing to come, and then it immediately forms a thread of seemingly related incidents, which are not related at all, but the mind makes it related just by the nature of its nature. And so what David is saying is that by speaking out loud, which is also a technique used in memory championships, so which I've been practicing also my whole life, speaking out loud, because then you get a verbal feedback back into your auditory system, and that already changes the shape of your thinking. It allows your mind to keep on going to a certain thread based on what you're saying out loud. So your voice is guiding your mind. How? By making your voice sound audible like that. So this is a technique that is common in memorizing. Instead of kind of verbalizing inside, speak it out loud. Because the moment you add auditory onto your modalities, like your visuals and your feeling, kinesthetic, you immediately activate a new part of the brain, which then, by the association, has to communicate with other parts of the brain. So this is a wonderful and highly recommended technique to speak out loud. Now, if you have people around you, which can be maybe a challenge, then you can work your way around that. You can I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you need to find the ways around that. So what Bao is saying is that in Vedanta, I mean, it's also part of yoga system where, dharana is to, withdraw all of those, convert those sounds around you into a reminder to bring those senses inwards. What's happening, for example, in my body, and therefore you reverse that attention because we're conditioned to giving attention to things outside. So now we use those very same things outside to remind us to bring our attention, what's happening in my body, in my mind, in my inner world. It has a context to just maybe kind of get into a meditative state. Another context that we're talking about is to guide the mind. Sometimes we need some form of guidance, and in what David is saying can be a useful guiding system. Verse 7, 8, 9, I will just chant verse 7. They're grouped together, that's why it's 7, 8, 9. Asmakam tu vishishtaye tani bodha dvijotama nayaka mama sainyasya sanyartam tan bravimite. Verse 7, 8, and 9, here Duryodhana talks about his side, the Kaurava side, and who the warriors are on his side, and he also exposes his insecurity. So two things are going to happen. Duryodhana will talk about that Drona is on his side. Obviously, he's talking to Drona. Bhishma is on his side, which is the grandsire of both Kauravas and the Pandavas. And also Karna is also a prominent figure who is on the Kaurava side. Now, Karna is a very interesting character in the Mahabharata because he was a son of Kunti, and Kunti is the mother of the Pandavas. And Karna was never recognized for his greatness. So the story goes is that Kunti, when she was young, she was the princess, and a sage came over to the palace where she was, and she treated the sage so well that the sage was touched. He was impressed by her conduct, and so he blessed her with a boon. And this boon said that you can pray to any devata, and that devata will fulfill you that wish. And so Kunti, being young, she was like we all are, right? Kind of, we didn't take it seriously. What is this? I can get blessed. Where can I pray? To whom? And so she went out and she prayed to the sun. And the sun blessed her with the child. And this child is Karna. Now, because Kunti wasn't mature enough, she was small, she was innocent, she was, still in those young years, you just want to explore and, enjoy yourself. She wasn't ready for this. And so she took this child and she put him in a cradle and she put him by the riverbank and she said a little prayer and sent this child off for hopefully someone to find him and become his foster parents. And like this, Karna grew up with foster parents, but he developed a complexion because he is the son of Kunti, and the Pandavas are also sons of Kunti, and the Pandavas are great. So in the same manner, Karna was also great, but he was also the son of the sun. He was the son of the sun. Therefore, he was extremely noble, loyal, talented, and he had brilliant qualities of himself. However, he had a complexion. Whether it's a he or a she, doesn't matter. We can use with either gender. I don't mean to be one gender over the other. He had a complexion. And that is, even though he knew his inner talent to be shining and being brilliant and be able to be discriminative and, to think, he was not recognized for who he was as a Kshatriya. He was a warrior, and in the society, we all have a place to fit. However, owing to his unique circumstances, he couldn't find himself where he could fit because he didn't have his own parents. He was not born in some hierarchical, position of kings and queens. He was with foster parents. So he carried this complexion, that I know I am great, I know I am shining, I know that I am much more than this person, but there is nobody to see me. There is nobody to recognize me. Not only or necessarily because I'm not in the right environment and people simply don't see you because maybe you're talented, but you're not in a place where the environment is supportive of your growth. It's like being a scientist or a rocket scientist, and you walk into a convention for business, like a conference for business or marketing, and nobody really values your science degree there because it's just the environment is not, even though they're both sort of intelligent, marketers are intelligent, scientists are intelligent, but they just don't value your particular expertise. And so Karna, like this, was, begging or yearning to be acknowledged, to be recognized, but there was no one to recognize him. So what happened is one day early on in the Pandavas and the Kauravas career, the Pandavas, before Arjuna, he was the best archer of all of the sides. Before he could prove his and establish his position to be the best archer, Karna came over and he stopped the competition and he says, wait, before Arjuna gets crowned to be the best archer, I want to show that I am equally, if not better. And Karna wasn't being arrogant about it. He just knew that he is great in his composure, in his talents, in his skills. But then what happened was the Pandavas, they stopped Karna and said, hey, who are you? This is a game for princesses. You're no kshatriya, you're a nobody. And you can imagine yourself going to a place like that where it's not about hierarchical position, because end of the day, it's about, greatness. It's about showing your expression of greatness. But he felt humiliated because of this treatment, and he wasn't allowed to shine. He wasn't allowed to be seen. He wasn't allowed to be recognized. Now, in that moment, when the Pandavas dismissed Karna, Duryodhana happened to be there, and Duryodhana took him under his wing. And Duryodhana recognized, this man is great. This man has talent. And in that moment, what happened? A lifelong of yearning that Karna had, lifelong of struggle to be seen, to be heard, to be someone to take me, someone to belong somewhere. Finally, I found my friend, and that was Duryodhana. And in that moment, Karna's loyalty shifted to the extreme of Duryodhana because he was the first person who actually recognized his greatness. However, what happened is because Karna's yearning was so strong for recognition, he oversaw Duryodhana's other qualities, which is very indicative of relationships. Sometimes we have this need for emotional connection, and the first person that comes to us, we fall in love with them. But then as time goes by, we start to see that qualities are unfolding, which are not necessarily helpful for me in my long-term value system, in my long-term vision for what I stand for. But because the yearning for emotional satisfaction is so strong, then the person is forced to start to justify and say, well, it's okay. I'm getting my satisfaction for the emotional system, even though I may not necessarily connect at other levels. And so you have to create a story and live from that story. This is also a possibility. It's really helpful, though, if someone sees you, if someone recognizes you, if someone holds you, if someone allows you to smile, to make mistakes, to get up, to fall down, to be seen. But at the same time, that someone also has qualities which you want to yearn to develop in yourself. They have qualities which you honor, which you find extremely enriching, extremely refreshing, and you just flourish in their presence. So that is a twofold benefit. Whereas Karna, in some sense, has gotten one-fold benefit. He was recognized, but at the expense of having to now start to, accumulate Duryodhana's qualities, which were not in Karna's best self-interest. So like this, Karna was for the first time seen, and there was another time where he was dismissed, and that it was when there was a competition, was it Draupadi's procession, right? And Arjuna was, they were shooting a fish. They had to shoot a fish eye with a bow and arrow, and they had to look at the reflection on the surface. It's quite hard. You're looking at a surface reflection, and you have to aim up the bow and arrow, and they have to wait for the right time to release your arrow, and then it hits the fish spinning in a circle. It's very hard. So it was the kind of test that a man had to pass to marry a woman. Nowadays, it's very easy. The man can just take her on a quick ride, and she falls in love with him, and it's just cheating nowadays. So men need to step up, right? And women need to also step up by not only just falling in love left and right, but really looking at the whole issue, like a bigger, larger picture. Does this man have qualities that are reflective of wisdom and loyalty, and is this an integrous person? Are they integrated? And so many more things than nowadays of just emotional chemistry that is happening at the level of the physical body. So this is another nice lesson that we have there. So again, Karna was having this psychological complexion, which he carried throughout his life, and nobody saw or heard him until Duryodhana came over, and he naturally, you can't blame him, he naturally became a friend, and like this, he for the first time felt, I belong somewhere. I'm finally in some part of something much larger. This part to connect is so strong nowadays that people will find anything to connect. They will find their culture to connect, they will find community to connect to, family to connect to, some spiritual community to connect to, so many things that we're looking for to connect to. But at the same time, you need to ask yourself, yes, I have a need to connect. That's true for all of us. But that which I'm connecting to, how many of my value systems is it really pleasing? How many value systems is it fulfilling? Is it just fulfilling my emotional need? Or is it fulfilling not only my emotional, but my spiritual, my intellectual? Does it challenge me? There's two more incidences that happened to Karna. And I'll ask you a question after I say this, just so you can see what kind of character, where was Karna's flaws? Because I told you his good qualities now. Let's talk about where his flaws are, not for the sake of putting down the person, but just to reflect. So right before the war, Krishna, he was by the riverbank and he was thinking, and Krishna slowly, gently came behind him, and he wanted to talk to him. And Krishna knew, the only two people knew that Karna was the son of Kunti, was Krishna and Kunti. So Krishna came over to Karna and said, why are you on the side of Duryodhana? He's not healthy for you. He's not, he is a friend, but he's not the kind of man that you want to aspire to be. And Karna said to him, I know that if I stay on the Kaurava side, I cannot win this war. I know that I will lose, but so far my life has been a tragedy anyway. There is no point of reversing my decision because I've gotten all of the support I need from Duryodhana. For this reason, I'm willing to be loyal to him. And so Krishna tried to help Karna see a larger perspective of where he stands in the larger perspective. And Karna, by his free will, chose to continue staying exactly where he is. Now, Karna has gotten a second chance again, where Kunti came to him and she said, Karna, I've been holding something dear to me for many years, and I finally have the composure to tell you that you are my son. And Karna said, why are you telling me now? The war is about to begin. You let me be humiliated for all of my adulthood. What's this? Why are you saying this now? It's not appropriate. And Kunti finally gotten the composure to say to him that I felt since a child shameful and guilty for not having the courage to let you know that you are my son. And the longer that I didn't tell you, the more I felt shameful and guilty. And the burden was so heavy on my heart that I now have to come to you and show you that you have a mother and it is me. And so she wanted to connect with her son because she knew that Karna could die in the impending war. So Karna said to her that, fine, I acknowledge that the Pandavas are my brothers. I do have 5 brothers. However, it is now too late because the war is about to begin and I'm too entangled in this situation. So I will spare my 4 brothers, in other words, your 4 sons, but I will kill Arjuna. It will either be him or it will be me. And for a mother to hear this, that her sons are going to, right, fight each other and one of them is going to die, it's very hard to hear, but it's something that Kunti had to bear. So now my question is, what I've done is before this class started, I generated some questions and I want to ask you this question. How does the story of Krishna and Kunti visiting Karna, as I explained before the war, illustrate Karna's character and choices? What does it say about Karna's character and choices that he had 2 chances to change his mind, to look at a larger picture?
Yeah, if I may say.
Yeah, go, Gautam.
Yeah, Karna had been introduced by his mother about his genetics as to where he belongs. He knew his true brothers. He knew that those 2 brothers of his were on the right side of dharma, but he wanted to stick to his friendship dharma because that was the one which gave him dignity, and he didn't want to betray his friend at the end. So that is what he made his choice.
Brilliant.
We all know that Karna is the greatest giver, and he showed his best to his mother, because at that time, I think it was like very rare that he was in front of his mother, I guess. So that was his, I guess, time to shine in front of his mother. And he did his best. I mean, apart from his character throughout the Mahabharata, I would say he did the best.
He based mainly on his life's value, on loyalty, because he didn't see any loyalty from the time he was a child till he grew up. So loyalty became the most important thing, because Duryodhana accepted his form as he was. So yeah. So basing on that, I think the loyalty took over his entire emotional state.
Yeah.
It didn't matter who's related to him.
Yeah, it is the characters are, all the characters are not presented as divine incarnations as wise as Krishna or somebody like that. They're all presented with all the weaknesses that belong to a human being. And from that aspect, Karna made a most immature decision that any youngster would make in that age, and then later repent and become despondent and face the consequences all by himself.
So what Bao is saying is that Karna was young and he stuck with that sort of group, you know, that group of it's my group, and I'm going to stick in that group because it gives me a sense of brotherhood. As I said in the last session, you know, that brotherhood sense, and it's very powerful. It gives you a lot of love. But then he also, I would add, had a chance to refine his responses, look at the larger picture as Krishna was explaining, and make a new choice, because nobody said to him, you need to stick to what you're doing. You have a chance to collapse a different option at any moment, and I'm just presenting you the facts right now, Karna, and you can move to the side of Dharma and thereby change the whole trajectory of your life. Would you like to take this option up? And then Karna, as Alina said, did the best he could according to the information that he had.
Karna's understanding of dharma was too skewed that it got limited to his own personal dharma.
Yeah.
Where he gave priority to his loyalty towards Duryodhana above than his responsibility towards society.
Mm-hmm.
He could have courage to say, Duryodhana, that you are doing wrong, and I won't be with you in this wrongdoing.
On that note, I would like to add just one more thing, that the loyalty, it's like inside all of us is the same thing. The only thing is Arjuna was loyal and surrendered himself to Lord Krishna, while Karna surrendered his loyalty and his love and everything to adharma, means
Right.
Duryodhana,
Right.
right? But he was a good person, but he surrendered himself to, he gave all he had to somebody was not on a great side.
Yeah.
But as a person, he was same loyal as Arjuna was to Krishna. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I would just
If I
add,
may add,
as Mina said, because his dharma was slightly skewed, he was not taking into account all of the variables that he could have, at any moment start to ask. And maybe that was also why he stuck to one side.
The reason he was loyal to the Adamic side is because he carried a lot of bitterness inside him because he was being wrongdoing. Sorry, I'm not speaking there. He had all he wasn't treated well by any side in the past. So when one side treated him well, he allied to that side, no matter whether that was Dharma or Adharma.
Right.
So my point is, he was clouded by his bitterness, so he couldn't think clearly and go, okay, let me put everything aside and look clearly at the situation and then make a choice based not on my past experiences, but on what I can see.
Sometimes there are people who, if somebody does something to them and their feelings are hurt, maybe, just a remark that was not thought out very well, and they get angry and they will never forgive them. I mean, even if the person comes to them and apologizes honestly and completely and asks for forgiveness, they will not forgive.
Right.
To me, I see a little of that. He was treated poorly and he will never forgive.
Yeah, it's what Leo was saying. In Panchatantra, I read once that, when a man is poor, then most of his ethics just go out the door. So because you talk to him about ethics and he says, what ethics? Just I need money to eat. So you need to provide a platform for the person, some sustainable life source in which the person can feel comfortable and start to actually bring in the ethics. So in that same manner as Carrie and Leo were saying, is that if the environment is not sustainable for me and there's nothing in it for me to exercise my ethics, then the person will find some corners to cut and they will find the closest approximate to what's going to give me that yearning of human need of love and connection and brotherhood. So this is another possibility. Duryodhana now says, quote, these people on our side have come to give up their life, to contribute their time, energy, and effort for me. In other words, I am the reason why most of these men have assembled here. Now imagine you're in this position and you say, all of these people are coming for my sake. Does this sound like you're really, where is your mind? Where would your mind have to be to make this kind of statement, right? Because when a person comes for a larger cause, what happens usually is that you speak in a different language. You say we. In other words, we have all gathered here for some larger cause to protect the society, to protect what matters, to protect what enriches everyone's lives. Whereas if you remove this language, it is what we call in psychology self-soothing. In other words, it is a self-soothing language to reassure myself that my swadharma, my personal conclusions, my personal life has brought me in this place, and it is the right place to be. Now, how do we self-soothe ourselves in psychology? There's several methods. In Duryodhana's case, what he was doing is there's a sense of a facade. So you put on this kind of a fake facade, you put on different ears, like a bunny ears, or you put bear ears, and they represent a different person. We actually do this in, there's some psychology practices. You put on a mask, and when you put on a mask, you become a different person. And it makes you temporarily escape that insecure individual that we're experiencing, that we don't find comfortable. And we're allowed to kind of play this role of the bear or the giraffe or right something. And so Duryodhana's approach was through fake bravado, and that is to show to himself, to show to his teacher, and show to everyone on his side how he has, composure, and this is all for a good cause. A second way that we self-soothe ourselves is by choosing to tell people about it. Now, there's two approaches. One, you can come to a friend or a teacher or someone that you trust, and you can talk about your inner angst, and you can express yourself honestly, but your intention is not just to talk and have them hear you, but your intention simultaneously is to get third-party perspective, to ask for their perspective so they can help you to elevate you out of your stuckness. Because that is what this sense of fear or insecurity means. I am putting my perspective into one possibility, and I don't see all of those other possibilities. So by mentioning where you stand to a person that is slightly more informed about the matter, that person can say something to get you out of this bubble, and so you can hop into a different bubble and see a little bit more of the playing field. The third way that we self-soothe ourselves is through anger. That means there's an insecure person who finds it hard to deal with challenges or to confront what is being faced. And the fastest way to kind of cover that up or to show that I am composed, that I have no problems here, is to put on a facade of anger, like an angry person who is really underneath desperately trying to regain control of the situation. That's what anger usually means. The second thing that anger means is that my standards have been violated. What this means is that I have a certain way how I expect people to deal with me and how I expect people to respond to me. How fast I want you to reply to my emails, how I want you to sort of greet me. All of these, we set up these standards. And when someone goes totally against those standards, if we are not careful, they can trip us up. In other words, we can turn into an emotional person who disregards our well-being, because it costs you to be angry. It costs you peace. It costs you mentality. It costs you intellect. So if we're not careful, then we can fall for this emotional reaction because our standards have been understandably violated. So what the person can do is they can just pause, take a deep breath. You recognize that tightening in the chest, that uncomfortable sensation that precedes the anger. Right before anger comes, there is some sensation in your body, somewhere in the chest, in the heart, in the throat, somewhere in the lips, there's tightening of the jaw. And the moment you notice that, anger is coming, stop. And then you just take a deep breath and notice, what do I really want to communicate? And how can I communicate it in the best possible way so that when I do communicate it, it doesn't make the situation even more tense. Rather, it throws light on the matter. I communicate myself in a non-violent way by expressing that what was done, I do not feel healthy about this. It doesn't make me want to open up to you. It makes me want to close down. It makes me want to distance myself from you. If I don't communicate this with you, you don't know. So I can't assume that you won't know me, that you won't magically know how I feel. And this is where most of the relationships go a little bit, off, is that we assume just because we're married or we have a partner with us, that they are supposed to know how we feel. Is this true? It's not true. I mean, it will be great if sometimes, yes, they do, because they can read your face and so on. But end of the day, totally true, that is not the case. So we need to be honest about how is it that I feel right now, and and then to ask you, what I really need in this moment is just to be seen, like Karna. I'm a Karna in this moment. I know I have a lot to give you, but I'm not being allowed to give my love. I'm not allowed to be given myself to you. So will you be willing to accommodate me? Are you willing to help me to kind of connect with you? And then the other person can say, okay, what is required to connect with you? And then you can share. Well, I just want to spend some quality time with you. Let's just hold hands, or let's just go together on a park. let's just sit down and watch a movie for 10 minutes or whatever, and then you reestablish that connection. It's a much better approach than fake bravado. No, I don't need you. I'm self-independent. I got Vedanta in my life. I am Brahman. Right? I mean, I've heard all of these things before, right? I don't need anyone, right? I'm beyond this world. There's still a human being, right? And this human being cannot be thrown into some kind of a portal where they're just a different person, and there's this magical, magical reality that's all over the place who doesn't need anyone. So this is not a...
May I add?
Yes,
I believe ego in spirituality is worse than the worst form of egos anywhere else.
Yes. So it's true, because it's so hard to fix by the time it gets spiritually arrogant, because now the person knows too much. They're like, I'm just following my swadharma, you're out of your dharma. It gets into a real bad shape from then on. So what does the war show us so far? It shows us that the people, the personalities in that time are the exact same people and personalities in this time. We all have karma in us. We know we're shining, we're great in our own unique fashion, but sometimes we feel like nobody's really there for us. And then you have to find a way not to go into depression, because there's a long life to live, and it's not just now. There's tomorrow, it can be different. Next year, it can be different. It shows us that these are archetypes. For example, Bhishma is an archetype who is more or less guided by principles. But at the same time, even though he's guided, he also has some distortions in those principles. We have Drona. Drona is a fantastic, talented teacher who can draw the best out of the student. But Drona's weakness is that he is a little bit sometimes biased. And there are two situations when it's shown. First one is that Arjuna was his favorite, because if teacher has favorites, and there will be favorites, this is just human behavior, but if the teacher is showing a lot of favoritism towards any one student, then other students notice this, and they feel like, I'm not worthy, and there's this whole rivalry that now gets set up. So this is one of Drona's weaknesses, is that he was showing explicitly his bias towards Arjuna. And second indication that he was biased or emotionally driven by biases is that when his son, when he was told that his son, Ashwatthama, not that son, because Yudhishthira didn't say your son, he just said Ashwatthama is dead. And Drona thought, oh, my son is Ashwatthama, therefore my son is dead. And what happened? Drona put down his arms and he surrendered, and Drishtadyumna killed him. So it shows that even though he's a great teacher, he's still driven by some dependence. He still has a dependence on his son. He has a dependence on good students for him to shine. The point of a teacher is to make everyone shine, and the teacher, him or herself, doesn't depend on anyone for the teacher to keep going, because the teacher is here for a larger cause. It's not about the teacher, it's about a big vision. The vision is the truth. The vision is God, not a little person in this vast universe who's saying, oh, I'm going to teach you as long as, you all love me and you all respect me and you all kind of show your love. This is not the point. This is not, even though you can still teach like that, that is going to come that's going to create a distortion in the whole class. And that's going to go around as an silent, unspoken elephant in the room undercurrent. And it's not healthy for anyone. So this was Drona's, you could say, weakness. And then we have Duryodhana. Duryodhana was explicit about everything. He held nothing back. He just said it how it is. However, his weakness was he had no priyamvadam. He just said what he thought, but how he delivered it was sometimes too strong for a person to hear. It's like me saying, oh, you look fat today. Yesterday you look beautiful, today you look totally fat. Go put something else on. Now, I may be factually kind of feeling that, but it is totally hurtful for you to hear that. So I need to incorporate a little bit of pleasantness, a little bit of professionalism and ethics and culture into my language. And then we have Dhritarashtra. What kind of an archetype he is? He's the archetype who is walking around as one whose wishes are unfulfilled, but he is silent about it. And his inner dissatisfaction expresses through other people, like his son, through his daughters, and he lives through his son and his daughters. He tells his son, go make money, become a millionaire. Why? Because I wasn't a millionaire. Why? Because it's going to make me, father, proud of having a son like that. So in other words, it's got more to do with the father than the actual son. Not a real, but a father, if they're careful, will say, son, I honor your path. You're born to become great in your own unique way. I want you to find that uniqueness for yourself. I'm just going to provide a platform for you on which you can sometimes come to me and ask some questions if you have any. So in other words, like this, the father is there to be an objective father rather than the one who secretly coerces the son to be how the father wants them to be. This is a parent that is informed. So what the war wants to show you, the story, is that every character, as exalted as they are in their own way, simultaneously has some weaknesses in their own way also, like Yudhishthir. He was righteous, all right, and he was, the king of Dharma. But at the same time, he lost that Dharma when it was time to play dice. And so the point is to, as Bao said, at any moment, if I let go my guard and I suddenly think I've heard this before, I've heard the Gita before, I can let go, I tell you, life will throw a test at you and it will show you whether you have really understood this or not. So in Vedanta, we keep on saying, this is a journey until last breath. Whether one knows the truth or not, it's a journey until last breath either way. For you, for me, for all of us. Only when you're sitting on the bed or lying on the bed, however it is, you can say, Lord, I have done the best I could. I made some mistakes. I've gotten up. I've looked at my responses. I've refined my responses. I have educated myself to the best of my ability. Now you choose what happens next, because I have no last say. And this is humility, I tell you. Even if someone knows themselves as the ultimate truth, even then, they're not going to say, I don't need anyone. I am free of you all. I don't need to do this. No, Ishvara has the last say. Ishvara has the last say whether the individual remains the cause of the universe, the self remains the cause of the universe, or whether that very Mr. Enlightened, Mrs. Enlightened, comes back as another human body. Therefore, it is a journey of humility all the way until last breath. There's no space for sort of, I figured it all out and I know Dharma and I don't need to speak to anyone anymore. It's education. Because the brain reverts back to its old notions. And those old notions have run your life for millennia, not just this life, for lifetimes. So you cannot expect magically to hear Vedanta for 1 or 3 years and suddenly to walk out as this brand new person. In real life, it doesn't happen like that. So we have these pressures to overcome consistently.
Where we are right now has mentioned a numerous number of names. And these names, do they mean something? Do the etymology of these names help us understand certain qualities within us that needs to come to the fore, or compare and contrast as to how we conduct ourselves? Duryodhana, for example, means one who's difficult to overcome.
In India, we have this naming system where, they will look at your star chart sometimes and they will, by that, your name could be accounted because of what someone else gave you. And that could potentially reflect your personality. Now, even if someone got it wrong and they gave you a completely different name, the thing is that if you discover what your name really means, you end up playing the role of your name. So your name itself can end up being a contributing force to how you are in life. If someone's name is, Arjuna, the great warrior, then and you walk around saying, Arjuna, what does that mean? It means the great warrior. And so it lets you even, if we speak of, etymology, it kind of puts you in a role that is reflective of your name. So in that sense, it can potentially influence the character's personality. But also a human dynamic isn't so black or whitish. So we can't quite say Duryodhana is always, the one that is difficult to overcome. Or he's like, who was it, Shakuni, he's like the whirlpool, or Karna is like the crocodile. It's that a human being can change throughout their life, as they make new decisions, they refine their responses, and their name suddenly carries this old fingerprint, but you're a brand new person. So this can also be the case. Otherwise, if we look at these characters as just, who they are as a name, that in real life, it's not like that, because you're so much more than just your name.
Yeah, and like Karna, for example, I just looked it up. It says to be either a year or a helper.
And that was reflective in his personality too.
Personality, yeah.
But at the same time, you can make a total transformation, just like if you're born as a Shudra, right? Just an ordinary person who's kind of, with parents who are, work laborers, or they're in an ordinary position in society. You can elevate yourself to a much higher position through your own choices. So you don't have to stay as that person who you were born, as that person who you're told to be. You don't have to stay in your culture. You can, kind of rise above that. Because even culture holds us down sometimes. We say, no, it's our culture to eat meat. And so I say, no, I'm not going to follow my meat culture. I'm going to do what is healthy for me. So in that sense, the person elevates themselves above their own culture, above their own name, above their own, their family standards and so on, in the name of something much larger than just culture, just name, just, your own personal, beliefs. So that's the idea of the ultimate goal, to rise above all of these self-imposed limitations that we are given.
I was thinking when Vig was asking if the names mean something, that he was trying to perhaps look at what you're saying and thinking, is all this meaning that you're expressing coming from the names? And I think it must be coming from the Mahabharata, not from the Gita part of that. So I think you've read a lot of the Mahabharata to understand these characters. And
right.
So I'm wondering if you would recommend that we read the Mahabharata, or is there a film we can watch to understand these characters more, or is it best just to listen to your explanation?
I mean, I did watch the Mahabharata, the earliest one, 1980. All the ones, they're all Bollywood style. I did watch that and took notes. We usually watch the whole thing, but I paused every 5 minutes taking notes. So I had 300 pages of notes just from watching that. The second is I did get educated with my teacher. And the third is I did kind of think about this before, we do the lessons. But at the same time, you don't have to now go chasing for these books. Look at the symbolism that I'm saying. Verse 10, Duryodhana says to Drona that our army is led by Bhishma, and the Pandavas' army is led by Bhima. Now, it's strange because the Pandavas' army is actually led by Drishtadyumna, Draupadi's brother, but he says the army is led by Bhima. It's because there was a special rivalry between Bhima and Duryodhana. When they were small, one time Duryodhana tried to poison Bhima and throw him inside the river. But they were also both great, mammoth people, strong people. So they were being taught by Balaram, and Balaram is a brother of Krishna. And Balaram also had a slight preference for Duryodhana, whereas Krishna, he had preference for nobody. Krishna was simply on the side of Dharma, what is righteous, what is good for all. And Pandavas happened to be on the side of Dharma, which is exactly why Krishna was on the side of Pandavas. The second reason why Duryodhana mentions Bhima is because when Draupadi was attempted to be disrobed, then Duryodhana tried to make her sit on his thigh. And that was very disrespectful because she's the wife of the Pandavas. And so he promised that one day I will crush Duryodhana's thigh, which he tried to make Draupadi sit on, and I will drink its blood. So it's a graphic scene, but he was very adamant about his promise. And so Duryodhana knew that Bhima is his greatest threat. Okay, now next verse, Duryodhana tells his strategy how to win the war. So this is verse 11. Ayaneshu cha sarveshu yatha bhargam avastitaha bhishmam eva bhirakshantu bhavantah sarva eva hi. Every war has a strategy to be won. Every business has a strategy to grow. Every household has a strategy to make things, slightly better in the household somehow. So in that same way, when it comes to decide between the side that is the material side of myself and the spiritual side of myself, in that sense, there's a strategy. How do I discover my spiritual side of myself? This is one way you can look at it. Another way you can say is that Duryodhana wanted to strategize how to win the physical war. So you can go both sides. So he said that he understood, Duryodhana, that Bhishma had a boon. And this boon was that Bhishma was invincible. Protect him at all costs. Why? Because he cannot be killed, and therefore he has the capacity to win this war. Because no matter how many Pandavas try to kill him, he can't get killed. And therefore, by him staying alive as long as possible, he will decimate the Pandavas. So this was Duryodhana's strategy. Okay, so the Pandavas started to get worried that Bhishma couldn't get contained. And so Arjuna came to Krishna and said, how do we contain this man? Because no matter what we do, he's killing so many. And Krishna said to him, what you have to do is, or what I suggest you do, is to go at night when nobody sees you, go secretly to Bhishma's tent and ask him how to kill him. And Arjuna went that night to Bhishma's tent, and Bhishma says, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be on your side. And Arjuna says, look, I want to ask you, how do I kill you? And it's kind of a strange question, right? Okay, I will tell you exactly how to kill me. So Bhishma knew that he was kind of helplessly on the side of the Kauravas, and that Pandavas were on the side of Dharma. Bhishma was already informed about that. He had no doubt about it. But he also had a certain connection to Arjuna. So he said to him, I was waiting for you to come, because no matter what you do, I cannot be killed, and you cannot win this war until I'm gone. So then Arjuna said, and so how do I kill you? And Bhishma says, well, I do have a vow that no matter what happens, I'm invincible. But I've also have a second vow, which is that I will not raise my arms against a woman. I will not defend myself against a woman. There is a person on your side, Arjuna, called Shikandi, who was a woman in the previous life. And if he shoots an arrow, I will not defend myself because he is a woman in a man's body. And that's exactly what Arjuna did. So the next day he stood behind Shikandi. So it looked like Shikandi was firing the arrows, but it was Arjuna. I think this is what happened. And so as Arjuna shot, he kept on shooting, and Bhishma didn't defend himself. And so he was struck by multiple arrows. A bed of arrows was created for him. So he was lying on a bed of arrows, but he still couldn't die because he had this boon of invincibility. So he could only die under two conditions. Number one, that I see Hastinapur is completely safe and it's in the hands of a righteous leader. And second is that I will only die during Uttarayanam. Uttarayanam is specifically between January and July. It's a special time. And therefore, he was just kind of lying there for a couple of days on the bed of arrows, and it's all symbolic. So they'll now ask, how do you have gallons of blood just pouring out and a person's just lying there and nothing's happening to him, you can involve your intellect and totally dismiss the whole story and disconnect like this. Or you can just understand, is this way of communicating with us through stories, and this is part of the tradition. So why did Bhishma give his weakness or expose his weakness to Arjuna? He also had equal love to Pandavas, who he also equally loved as the Kauravas. So in that sense, maybe he wanted to help Arjuna and give away his secret. How they went about solving this challenge. They came to Krishna and they waited at the right time with the right context. And when it was the right time, that's when they went to Krishna and they asked, how do we solve this situation? They followed up.
And also, Andre, could it be that though they were fighting a war, the war was happening only on the battlefield? After that, they were not kind of stuck onto that, right? So they could even take the courage to walk onto the other side and ask the person himself, because after all, he's great-grandfather of Arjuna also, right? Great-great-grandfather. So that love still was there. Love was still there.
Yeah, that's a good one. So he felt comfortable, he had a connection, and so it wasn't like he was afraid of being killed. He was generally coming with a good intent, and it was for a larger cause. It was because Bhishma already knew that he's on the other side and Pandavas on the right side. So in that sense, he was empowered to walk over there and say, hey, I want to make this work. I also have my best interest for Hastinapur. I want to have a communication with you. If you don't want to communicate with me, it's okay. I will walk right back to where I came from. So this is a way of negotiating. Okay, so the next verse is what's happening now is that Bhishma is overhearing a conversation between Duryodhana and Drona. But because of the circumstances, Bhishma is unable to speak to them because he is concentrated on what is to be done. So he reassures them that he reassures Duryodhana by saying, I know what you're saying. I know what's cooking up in your mind. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to blow my conch to let you know that I am ready and I'm on your side, Duryodhana. So this will be verse 12. Tasya sanjanayan harsham kuru vrdha pitamahaha simhanadam vinadyo chaihi shankam dadmau pratapavan. Okay, and therefore Bhishma blew his conch, indicating that the war is about to begin. Now, what does blowing of the conch symbolize? Because it's a powerful instrument. It shakes you when you hear this thunderous conch. It just penetrates your being. It symbolizes that which energizes. It's an energizing instrument. It puts the warriors into a mood. It puts everyone into a conscious state of, okay, it elevates one's mind from here to here, because it's a different kind of harmony than just speaking. That's why we have music, and music, moves people. There's a story in one of the Vedic texts where there's a king called Akbar, and Akbar was having his favorite musician called Tansen in his chamber, what would you call it, throne. And Tansen was playing a beautiful music and entertaining Akbar, the king. And one day Akbar went out into the forest and he heard the most incredible, heart-shaking, touching, soul-touching music and harmonies he's ever heard in his life. And he was so touched by this, he ran into his king's chamber, and he said to Tansen, I thought you were the best. Because I just heard the most amazing man who was on a totally different level. I thought, what happened here? And Tansen says, oh, yes, that's my guru, Haridas. And says, well, he obviously hasn't taught you everything because he's on a whole different level. And Tansen says, well, he has, obviously, because, I'm his shishya. But the reason why you're so touched by him is because I am singing for you, Mr. Akbar, but he is singing for Ishwara. His devotion, his outpouring, it was something so much greater. And therefore, by that, he's energized so much more committed to express the harmonies and use his instrument in a much more inspiring way than if I just use this instrument for one single person. So this is a nice example to show us that if we turn this instrument towards something that's much greater than just surviving, waking up, eating, procreating, all these things make it very hard to move through the day with energy. The moment you turn your attention on your mental attention onto something that's much larger than you, your family, and the world, you find incredible amounts of energy just oozing out of you all day long. So you don't need to eat food and drink coffee all day and, you know, exercise is all lovely and healthy and it's recommended. But at the same time, mental energy, my vision being turned onto the Lord, that has no comparable caffeine. That is the ultimate caffeine right then and there. And that makes the person move and teach and want to, go through their whole life. And you, my God, where do you get so much energy? Like, what is it that you do? Tell me your exercises. Tell me your food. It's not about how many times I eat. It's not about what I eat. It's about my vision. My vision is on something much more that touches me in every cell in my body. Every cell, it touches me. Your vision touches you maybe just over here, just over here, just over here, just over here. Find the vision that touches you everywhere, that moves you out of bed and wants to make you not want to go to bed. What kind of a vision would that be? Where you're like, oh, look, it's 12 o'clock p.m. I really don't want to go to bed, but I have to go to bed because my body is yearning for it. And that is a great vision. So in that sense, harmonies, we are sensitive to harmonies. And in this sense, the conscious motivate everyone, uplift everyone's spirit, and therefore they are now ready to come back next week and listen to verse 13 and 18. And so next week, what will happen? Bhishma will blow his conch and everyone else will follow blowing their conch. And we will then see how that unfolds.
I think the modern, how lucky we are sitting, listening to you in the very peaceful environment. Just imagine the chunk blowing the conch to the roar of a B-52 and the air raid sirens in the modern world where wars and battles are happening.
Yeah, in also inner battle and wars. And so this is that one time per week that we have some focused time to undo our old orientations. Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.